My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 27 years old. Several evenings ago, my mother Carol stood in my workspace and physically moved my equipment away from the wall so my younger brother could position his recording setup. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't request permission. She simply announced it as though the decision had already been finalized and approved. We're converting this space for his creative studio. You can set up downstairs in the lower level. My brother Dylan was positioned against the door frame, watching with crossed arms as my computer screens went black, like he was enjoying some entertainment. He grinned and commented, "You'll manage just fine down there, won't you?" Fewer interruptions. He delivered it as though joking, but every syllable carried genuine intent. That space served as my professional headquarters, the environment I had constructed piece by piece to enable remote work as a web developer and cover the expenses that sustained our household's operations. I simply gazed at him, then at her, and all I could manage was, "All right." No shouting, no dramatic scene. I gathered my laptop, my external storage, and whatever items I could transport in a single journey. I walked past them directly down the staircase as though I intended to work in the basement exactly as they expected. They had no clue that when I said, "All right," my actual meaning was, "I'm finished with this arrangement." That evening, I departed silently. I transformed more than simply my desk's location. The following morning, the phone calls began. Then the messages, "We can't manage these costs without your contribution. Please respond." They contacted me continuously, as though suddenly I had become the sole individual on Earth who understood how to prevent their lives from collapsing. If you've ever questioned what occurs when the family member everyone takes for granted finally disappears, continue listening because their desperate pleas for my return might change how much you allow others to exploit you. Growing up, I always recognized my family operated with an imbalance. But I didn't comprehend the severity until finances became involved. I was the child who remained awake late completing assignments, who organized notes with color systems, who genuinely valued academic achievement. Dylan, my younger sibling, was the one everyone described as artistic and emotionally sensitive, which apparently meant regulations simply adjusted around his needs. When I gained acceptance to an excellent web development program through a merit scholarship, my mother Carol offered a brief embrace in the kitchen and stated, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You've always been dependable." When Dylan completed an online course he barely participated in, she ordered a specialty cake from the local bakery and shared it on social media as though he had discovered a cure for illness. I discovered early not to anticipate celebrations when I achieved success. Following graduation, when rent in downtown Chicago was essentially $3,000 monthly for a tiny space with basic plumbing, returning home to our place in the suburbs felt like the only financially rational decision. I convinced myself it would be temporary, just until I accumulated savings from my development position and freelance projects. What actually occurred was I gradually assumed responsibility as the household's unofficial financial institution, technical assistance, and solution provider. And nobody recognized this transition except me. It began modestly. Carol's paycheck fell short one month and the electric bill exceeded expectations, so I covered the difference. Then the internet got upgraded so Dylan could stream without connection issues. Somehow the new service ended up charged to my account. Then the streaming services, the music subscription, the shared mobile plan, the additional groceries for all the delivery meals we rationalized as family bonding time. I told myself, it's acceptable. I earn more income. This is what you do when you care about people. But each time my card automatically renewed some service none of them could survive a week without, I experienced that small twist in my chest. When Dylan decided he would become a content creator, Carol announced it as though she was declaring a professional career path, not a temporary interest. He requires some encouragement. She stated he possesses talent. He simply needs assistance. Assistance meant I paid $600 for an online influencer course he never completed. Assistance meant I ordered him lighting equipment and camera mounts from online retailers for the channel. Assistance meant I awakened at 2 a.m. to repair the internet when it failed during his late-night gaming sessions because he was experimenting with configurations. Meanwhile, my actual work, the work that genuinely generated income, occurred quietly in the background. I transformed that small room on the upper floor into a legitimate office because nobody else showed interest in it. I invested my personal savings on a quality desk, an ergonomic chair, a second monitor, a graphics tablet, and lighting, so I didn't appear exhausted on client video calls. I attached wireframes to the walls, wrote notes on adhesive pads, and developed an actual career in that environment. That office represented the difference between me barely surviving financially and me securing larger contracts, salary increases, better clients. But whenever Carol discussed it, she said, "Sarah is fortunate she can work remotely." Fortunate, as though it all simply materialized in my lap, and I didn't struggle to achieve it. Simultaneously, she discussed Dylan as though he was one viral video away from transforming all our circumstances. She never once inquired about how many hours I spent refining an interface or resolving bugs someone else overlooked. She only noticed when a bill arrived and somehow miraculously it got paid. I maintained this ongoing record in my phone's notes application just for personal reference. Rent I provided her monthly. Utilities I covered when she came up short. Subscriptions I forgot I enrolled for because everyone utilized them. Groceries, food delivery, ride services for her when she didn't want to use public transportation. Ride services for Dylan when he had some poorly planned job interview he never attended. Each time I updated that list, the total at the bottom became more disturbing. Carol kept calling it family supporting family. I started calling it me quietly losing money so they could pretend everything was functioning properly. The most difficult part was that they genuinely believed they were the ones experiencing the greatest hardship. Dylan would complain about how challenging it was to succeed as a creator. While sitting in the room I paid to heat and browsing through shoes he desired. Carol would grumble about increasing prices, and I would restrain myself instead of mentioning that my name was on half the accounts that kept her life comfortable. I understood logically that I had permitted this to develop. I agreed too frequently. I intervened before they ever had to experience the consequences of their own decisions. I smoothed every rough edge, and because I continued doing it, they assumed I always would. That was the dynamic. That was the script. Sarah will manage it. Sarah will pay it. Sarah will repair it. I simply never expected they would force me out of the very room that made all of that possible. The evening my mother pushed me out of my workspace, something within me finally stopped creating excuses for them and started asking the one question I had avoided for years. What would actually occur if I didn't manage it this time? That question wouldn't leave my thoughts. It followed me into the shower, into my dreams, into the quiet moments between meetings when my camera was disabled and my smile disappeared. What would happen if I didn't repair it this time? That evening, after Carol told me to use the basement, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, my laptop open, but my design files untouched. Instead, I opened the apartment search website. I typed in Milwaukee studio maximum price and pressed search as though I was just browsing. I told myself I was only curious. The rental prices still made my stomach tighten. But for the first time, they didn't feel completely impossible. I possessed savings. Not a fortune, but sufficient. I scrolled past dark, depressing units and questionable listings until one caught my attention. A small studio in a peaceful area of Milwaukee with a large window facing the street and just enough wall space for a desk and shelving. The photographs showed sunlight on hardwood floors and a compact kitchen with white cabinets. It wasn't luxurious, but as I browsed through the images, I could already envision where my monitor would go, where I would attach my wireframes, where I would place a plant and pretend I was someone who remembered to water it. I verified the price 3 times. $2,100 monthly. Expensive, but not unthinkable. When I calculated what I earned and what I would stop bleeding out on everyone else, I stared at the total in my notes app, the one tracking what I had poured into this house, and realized that in 1 year, I had already paid the equivalent of several months of that studio, but had nothing to show for it that actually belonged to me. The following morning, I informed Carol I had an early meeting at a client office in Milwaukee. Technically, it wasn't false. Someone there was about to decide my future. I took the train, clutching a folder with my pay stubs and identification, my heart pounding as though I was going to an interview. When the landlord, an older woman with kind eyes and a straightforward manner, opened the door. The place was even smaller than it appeared online, but it was clean. It was peaceful. And most importantly, it was mine if I wanted it. We sat at the tiny counter that served as a dining table while she reviewed the lease. "You work from home?" she asked. I nodded. "Web developer. I just need reliable internet and space for a desk." She nodded as though that made sense. "We don't tolerate parties," she said. "No loud music, no drama." I almost laughed. That's exactly what I'm trying to escape. When she slid the lease across, my hand trembled for a moment. My mind threw every fear at me at once. What if your work disappears? What if this is irresponsible? What if your family despises you? Then another thought cut through all of that. They already treat you as though you owe them your entire life, and they still didn't hesitate to push you out. I signed. I transferred the first month and the deposit. $6,400 disappearing from my account in one click. It hurt, but it also felt clean. This wasn't like throwing money into a bottomless pit of bills and excuses. This was building something for me. On the train ride back to the suburbs, I kept touching the new key in my pocket, the little piece of metal that meant I finally had a way out. When I walked through the door, Dylan was on the couch, shouting into his headset at some game. Plates from last night's delivery still on the coffee table. Carol was at the kitchen counter, scrolling on her phone, complaining under her breath about the cost of groceries. Nobody asked how my client meeting went. Nobody noticed the shift. That was fine. It actually made what I did next easier. I started small. That evening when they asked what we should order for dinner, I said I already ate. The next day when Carol texted me to add some items to the grocery delivery, I replied, "I can't cover extra this week. My budget is tight." It was the first time I had said no in years. There was a pause, then just a thumbs-up emoji. The internet glitched during one of Dylan's streams, and he stormed up the stairs to my office, or what was still technically my office, for a few more days. "Hey Sarah, can you reset the router? It's doing that thing again." I looked at my screen at the prototype I was testing at the time. "I have a deadline," I said without looking away. "You can figure it out." He stood there for a moment as though he had never heard those words from me before. Eventually he muttered something and stomped back down. The world didn't end. A couple of evenings later, when Carol mentioned needing a ride service for an early shift because she didn't want to deal with public transportation, I told her I couldn't put it on my account this time. Maybe ask Dylan or take the train. She gave me a look as though I had just spoken another language. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You always help." I forced a smile. "I'm just trying to be smarter with my money." It sounded so casual out loud, but inside it felt like tearing up an old script. Every no I said made it a little easier to say the next one. Behind the scenes, I started moving pieces of my life out of that house. The first thing that left was my external hard drive with all my client files. Then my sketchbooks, my favorite pens, a stack of clothes I could fit into a duffel bag. I told them I was decluttering, taking things to a storage unit, dropping stuff at a friend's place. None of it was technically false. The storage unit just happened to be my new studio apartment. I would finish my last meeting of the day, close my laptop, and then slide it into my backpack instead of leaving it on the desk. I took my monitor down one weekend under the excuse that it was acting strange and I wanted to get it checked. Little by little, my office became less my space and more just a room. They were too focused on Dylan's next idea for his channel and Carol's overtime schedule to notice how empty the shelves were getting. At night after they went to bed, I would make quiet trips to Milwaukee, carrying boxes down the stairs, one load at a time, so the old steps wouldn't creak too much. Every time I unlocked that new door and stepped into the silent studio, I felt my lungs open a little wider. I would set a box down, look around at the bare walls and the echo of my footsteps, and think. This is where I stopped being the person who fixes everything for everyone else first. I hadn't told them I was leaving yet. I wanted my exit ready before I said the words. If Carol could decide I no longer had a right to the space that funded their life in a single conversation at the dinner table, then I could decide in silence that I was done funding it. By the time they officially converted my old office into Dylan's studio with his cheap ring lights and shoeboxes stacked in the corner, almost everything that mattered to me was already gone. What they were really pushing out wasn't just a desk, It was the last piece of leverage they had without even knowing it. It all really snapped a couple of weeks later. By then, most of my important stuff was already in Milwaukee, but I was still sleeping in my old room, still pretending nothing had changed. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from grabbing a coffee and noticed something felt off when I walked past the door of what used to be my office. The room was open, light spilling in, Dylan's voice drifting out as he talked to his phone, testing angles. I stepped inside, and my eyes went straight to the empty spot where my ergonomic chair used to be. The cheap folding chair from the basement was there instead, wobbling under Dylan as he adjusted his tripod. My stomach dropped. "Hey, where is my chair?" I asked, even though I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Dylan barely glanced back. "Carol sold it," he said. "We needed the money for my microphone." The words hit harder than I expected. I turned, walked straight to the kitchen, and found Carol rinsing dishes as though it was any other day. "Where is my chair?" I repeated. She didn't even look up at first. "Oh, that," she said. "I listed it online. We got $250 for it. Dylan really needed a proper microphone if he's going to take this seriously. We'll get you something else for the basement. Your old one was excessive anyway." I just stared at her. That chair wasn't some random piece of furniture. I bought that with my bonus when my team shipped a major feature. I selected it after weeks of back pain, sitting in it on the showroom floor while imagining myself finally working like an actual professional instead of hunched over a kitchen table. "You sold it," I said slowly, without asking me. She shrugged, finally meeting my eyes with this annoying mix of confusion and irritation, as though I was the unreasonable one. "Sarah, it's just a chair," she said. "We share things in this house. We needed money. Dylan needed equipment. You can sit on literally anything and work. You're young. You'll be fine." Something inside me went very, very quiet in that moment. For years, I had tried to explain my perspective, to justify my spending, to gently remind them what I contributed. It never stuck. But standing there listening to Carol talk about a chair I bought with my own paycheck as though it was just community property she could cash out for Dylan's next hobby purchase, I realized talking was done. "You didn't share it," I said. "You sold it. And you didn't need money. You needed my money again." Her jaw tightened. "Don't start, Sarah," she warned. "We're all under pressure right now. You know how expensive everything is, and Dylan is trying to build something. He needs support." There it was again. That word support always flowing one direction. I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. "Everything is expensive. That's why some of us have been paying more than our share for years." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I walked over to the counter, grabbed my phone, and opened the Notes app I had been updating for months. I scrolled, turned the screen toward her. "This is what I mean. Rent, utilities, groceries, subscriptions, ride services, Dylan's course, his gear, half the stuff you don't even remember asking me to cover." I watched her eyes dart over the numbers, her mouth pressing into a thin line. "That can't be right," she said weakly. "That's exaggerated." The totals are insane. Things were tight, but not that tight. I tapped the screen. Screenshots, bank statements, receipts, it's all there. You can examine every line if you want. Dylan wandered into the doorway halfway through this, a controller still in his hand. "What's going on?" he asked. "Is this about the chair?" "Carol, I told you she would freak out. She's so dramatic about everything." I turned to him. "You think I'm being dramatic? You sold my chair so you could buy a microphone for your social media videos. A microphone I'm sure you expect me to help pay for when something goes wrong with the order." He rolled his eyes. "Relax. It's not that serious. We're family. We share. That office was just a room. You act like you built a hospital in there." A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. "You're right," I said. "It was just a room. A room where I worked the job that has been keeping this family afloat while you play influencer, and Carol pretends we can afford everything, because magic money appears every month." Carol stepped in quickly, her voice rising. "That's enough, Sarah. You're being disrespectful. We're all just doing our best." Dylan is trying to find his path. You've always been the responsible one. You can handle more. That's just how it is. There it was. The script. You can handle more. Translation. You will handle more because we don't want to. I felt my face go cold. No, I said. That's how it used to be. She frowned. What are you talking about? I slipped my phone into my pocket, suddenly done with this entire conversation. I'm talking about the fact that I'm moving out this weekend. The room went completely still. For a second, I thought maybe they hadn't heard me. Then Carol laughed, a short disbelieving sound. Don't be ridiculous. You can't just move out. Where would you even go? You know how expensive rent is? You're not thinking straight. Dylan snorted. Sure you are, he muttered. You're mad about a chair and a room, so you're going to run away and make everything worse. I looked between them, feeling strangely calm. You pushed me out of my office without a second thought, I said. You sold my furniture without asking. You took my money, my time, my energy as though it was owed. And you never once stopped to think what would happen if I stopped giving it. I have somewhere to go. I have a lease. I moved my important belongings out on Saturday. Carol's face went through disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. You can't do this to us, she said quietly. We need you here. You help with everything. You know we depend on you. I nodded. I know. That's why I'm doing it. Because as long as I'm here, nothing changes. Dylan scoffed. You're just trying to punish us. You'll come back. You always do. Maybe that had been true in the past. Not this time. I walked past them, went up to my room, and closed the door before they could say anything else. I sat on the edge of my bed, opened my phone, and pulled up the moving truck app. My thumb hovered over the screen for half a second. Then I selected the date, the time, the truck size I needed. When the confirmation came through, I felt this strange mix of terror and relief wash over me. Downstairs, I could hear Carol and Dylan arguing in low voices, the words muffled by the floorboards. For once, I didn't strain to make them out. They had made their decision the second they chose his ring light over my chair, his studio over my office. I was just finally making mine. Saturday came faster than I expected. All week, Carol acted as though my announcement had been a heat-of-the-moment outburst. She kept saying things like, once you cool off, we'll talk about rearranging the basement, or we can get you a new chair eventually. As though buying me a used office chair would erase the fact that she sold the one I loved without asking. Dylan mostly avoided me, except for a few passive-aggressive comments about how I was really going to screw everyone over, because I caught feelings about furniture. I didn't explain myself again. I just worked, packed, and watched the clock. On Saturday morning, the moving truck pulled up in front of the house right on time, the orange logo bright against our block of old suburban fronts. I stood on the sidewalk for a second with the keys in my hand, feeling neighbors look out through their windows. Carol opened the door with this brittle smile, as though she still thought she could talk me out of it if she just said the right thing. You really went and rented a truck, she said. You're being so extreme. You have no idea how hard life is out there. I carried the first box right past her without answering. My mattress, my dresser drawers, the last of my clothes, the cheap lamp I actually liked, the things I had intentionally left behind so that they would notice when they disappeared. The whole time the house felt oddly quiet. No music from Dylan's speakers, no television, just the sound of my footsteps and the scrape of furniture on wood. At some point, I went into the kitchen and took a sheet of printer paper from the drawer. Sitting at the table where we had eaten 100 takeout dinners I paid for, I wrote at the top, in big letters, what Sarah has paid for in the last 12 months. Then I started listing. Rent I handed Carol each month with the exact dollar amount. Electricity and gas I covered when she came up short. The phone plan, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, all the little subscriptions everyone used without thinking. Groceries and delivery orders. Dylan's $600 creator course, the ring lights, the tripods, the must-have accessories. Ride services for Carol when she didn't feel safe taking public transportation at night. For Dylan when he had job interviews or networking events he never followed through on. Next to each category, I wrote the total for the year, then drew a line at the bottom and added them up. 18,400 and change. I stared at that number for a long second. That was almost an entire year of rent at my new place. I grabbed a magnet and slapped the paper onto the front of the refrigerator where nobody could miss it. Carol walked in just as I stepped back. "What is this?" she asked, reaching for it. I moved faster and flattened my hand over the paper. "You can read it," I said. "You just can't take it down." Dylan wandered in behind her, barefoot, yawning as though it was any other Saturday. His eyes flicked to the truck outside and then to the paper. Carol's face went pale as she scanned the numbers. "This is exaggerated," she muttered. "You're making it sound worse than it is. Nobody asked you to do all this?" I laughed under my breath. "You didn't have to ask. Every time you said, 'I'm a little short this month,' or 'Can you just put it on your card and I'll pay you back?' that was you asking. You just never followed through on the second part." Dylan frowned when he saw his name. "You didn't have to write my stuff on there," he said. "You're trying to embarrass me." I shook my head. "No, I'm trying to be clear. You both keep telling yourselves we're all struggling the same way. You're not." I put the pen down and looked at both of them. "This is the last month I will ever pay for this house." Carol opened her mouth as though she had something sharp to throw back, but nothing came out. Dylan just looked angry and uncomfortable, which honestly was the first time I had seen him feel anything besides entitlement in a while. I loaded the last box, then went upstairs one final time to check that I hadn't forgotten anything that mattered. My old room looked weirdly bare. The bed frame and a few random things would stay. I left them on purpose. I wanted there to be empty space where my life used to be. When I carried my pillow down the stairs, Carol was standing by the door, clutching the edge as though she needed it to stay upright. "Sarah, please," she said quietly. "Just think about this. We need you here. We can't afford for you to just walk away." I paused, one hand on the doorknob. "You should have thought about what you could and couldn't afford before you pushed me out of the room that paid for all of this," I said. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because staying here is killing me." She shook her head, eyes glossy. "You're being dramatic. You'll be back. You always come back." "Maybe," I said. "But if I do, it won't be as your paycheck." I stepped out, closed the door behind me, and climbed into the driver's seat of the moving truck. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw them in the side mirror standing on the front steps. Carol had her arms wrapped around herself, and Dylan kept glancing from the truck to the paper on the fridge through the kitchen window. For a second, guilt twisted in my chest as it always did. Then I pictured my new studio, the sunlight on the floor, the key in my pocket, and I kept driving. That evening, I unpacked as much as my sore arms would allow, made a cheap dinner in my little kitchen, and sat on the floor among half-opened boxes. My phone buzzed a few times with texts from friends, a notification from my bank about the moving truck charge. Nothing from my family. The silence was almost eerie, but it also felt like proof that I was finally on my own. I went to sleep on a mattress on the floor, exhausted, but lighter than I had felt in years. The following morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating so hard it nearly slid off the nightstand. The lock screen was a wall of missed calls from Carol and Dylan, and a dozen notifications stacked on top of each other. For a second, my old instincts kicked in. Something must be wrong. Someone must be hurt. I grabbed the phone and tapped into the messages. The first text from Carol was simple. "Call me." Then the passwords were changed. "We can't log into anything. The internet bill is due and it's higher than I thought. Please fix this." Then, "We can't afford this without you. Please answer your phone." Dylan's messages were more frantic and less polite. "Seriously, the internet is out. I can't stream. Did you kill it on purpose?" Then seriously, Sarah, none of this is funny. Carol is freaking out. We can't pay all these bills without you. My phone started ringing again, Carol's name flashing on the screen. It buzzed and buzzed, the vibration filling the little studio. I sat there in the quiet, staring at her name, at Dylan's texts stacked underneath. For years, every time that phone lit up with their crisis, I dropped everything to solve it. I answered from meetings, from dates, from my own sick days, because if I didn't, everything would fall apart. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again and again, and I let it. I set the phone face down on the table, took a breath, and made myself a cup of coffee while it buzzed. They pushed me out of my own office as though I was optional, as though my work and my boundaries didn't matter. Less than 24 hours later, they were begging me back because they were finally feeling the cost of that choice. If you've ever wondered what happens when the person holding everything together finally stops picking up the phone, this was just the beginning. The calls didn't slow down after that first morning. If anything, they came in waves. I let most of them go to voicemail. Old me would have picked up on the first ring, already mentally rearranging my budget. New me looked at their names on the screen, felt the spike of anxiety, and put the phone face down. I still read the text, though. Curiosity is stubborn. Carol swung between guilt and anger. One minute it was, "I can't believe you would do this to your own family." And the next it was, "I'm sorry, I'm just overwhelmed. Please call me. I don't know how we're going to make it." Dylan's messages were a mix of complaining and entitlement. "You really killed the internet. Seriously, you ruined my stream." Followed by, "At least fix the account so we can downgrade." I drank my coffee, logged into work, and let their emergencies stay theirs. My days in Milwaukee were boring in the best possible way. I woke up, made breakfast in silence, worked through my development tasks, took a walk when I needed air, cooked simple dinners, and went to bed without anyone asking for my card number at 11:30 at night. A few days in, Carol left a voicemail that sounded different. Her voice was small, not sharp. "Sarah, I know you're angry," she said. "I know you think we don't appreciate everything you did. Maybe you're right, but the gas company is threatening to shut off service, and I didn't realize how much was in your name. We're behind. I don't know what to do. It's getting cold. Please." I felt that familiar tug in my chest, but I didn't call back right away. For the first time, I let them sit with the mess. Chicago answered her before I did. The temperature dropped hard. A couple nights later, my phone lit up again, and something in me said, "Pick up." I answered on the third ring. Carol's voice came through fast, almost frantic. "The heat is out," she said. "The furnace stopped working. It's freezing in here. The repair guy says it will be at least $400 just to get it running. We have nothing. We're overdrawn. We can't afford this. Please, I don't know what to do." Old me would have already been on my banking app, typing in my password. I took a breath instead. "Did you call the gas company to set up a payment plan?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, you always handle those things." "Exactly." I stared at the wall. "Carol, I'm not moving back there," I said. "I didn't ask you to move back," she snapped. Then her voice cracked. "I'm asking you to help. We're cold. Do you want something to happen to me?" Dylan yelled in the background. "Come on, Sarah. This is serious. It's not about internet." Carol is freezing. "Do you really not care?" There it was. The guilt hook they always used. The one that had worked every time before. I heard it, acknowledged it, and still didn't bite the same way. "I will help once," I said. "But not the way you think." Silence. "What does that mean?" Carol asked. "It means I'm not just dropping my card and disappearing again," I said. "If I step in, there are conditions, real ones. You can say no, but if you say yes, you stick to them." Dylan scoffed. "Conditions. This is our heat, not a business deal." I ignored him. "One," I said. "I will pay for the furnace repair this time so you don't freeze while we figure this out. After that, I'm off your bills completely. 2, we sit down in person and go through every dollar you make and spend. We make a budget that doesn't include me as a secret line item. 3, Dylan gets a real job, actual paychecks. At least $300 a month from that goes toward the house. And 4, you both stop treating me like 24/7 tech support and bailout. If you want advice, ask. But I'm not your automatic solution anymore." Carol was quiet for a long moment. "So you're basically asking us to live without you," she finally said. "No," I said. "I'm asking you to live like I'm your daughter, not your bank. You can say no, but if you do, you'll figure out the heat without me." More muffled arguing on their end. When she came back, she sounded tired. "Fine," she said. "Just please get the heat fixed." I called the repair company myself, paid the deposit with my card, and set the appointment. It still stung to watch the money leave my account, but at least this time it was part of an actual boundary, not another invisible sacrifice. The next evening, I went back to the house for the first time since I left. The air was warmer, but the vibe was frostier than the November wind. Carol sat at the kitchen table with a pile of unopened bills. Dylan hovered by the counter, arms crossed, as though he was ready to bolt. I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank spreadsheet. "Okay," I said. "Income first." Carol bristled as though I had just asked for her social security number, but she started talking. Hours, pay rate, average tips. I typed it all in. Then we listed out the actual bills. Mortgage, utilities, phone, internet, minimum payments, subscriptions. Anytime we hit something that used to be in my name, I flagged it. Formerly me, not anymore. When it was Dylan's turn, he shrugged. "I don't really have anything," he said. "I'm just trying to grow my channel." "That's not an income," I said. "That's a hobby right now. This is what you're spending. This is what's coming in. The math doesn't care about your channel. If out is bigger than in, something changes. Either you earn more or things go." Carol looked between the columns and I could see it landing in a way it never had when I was just covering everything. "I can pick up another shift," she murmured. "Maybe work weekends." She turned to Dylan. "You can at least get a part-time job. You're on your phone all day anyway. Go sell something." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. I think the memory of shivering in his own house did more than any lecture I could have given. I emailed them the spreadsheet and shut my laptop. "The heat is taken care of," I said. "This is on you now." Carol's eyes were shiny. "So, you really are done," she said. "You just walk away." I shook my head. "I'm not walking away from you," I said. "I'm walking away from being your safety net. I will still come for dinner. I will answer the phone when I can, but I'm not going back to the way things were." On my way out, I glanced at the refrigerator. The paper with my list of what I had paid for was still there, edges curled, but nobody had taken it down. They had to look at it every time they grabbed milk. That felt like its own kind of progress. When I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me, the house behind me finally felt like what it was. Their home, their responsibility, their problem to solve. For the first time, I walked away, knowing that if everything fell apart in there, it wouldn't automatically be my job to rebuild it. 6 months later, my life in that house looked nothing like they did the evening Carol pushed me out of my office. In Milwaukee, my studio finally felt like home. I bought a cheap rug, strung up a couple of prints I designed myself, and set my desk right by the window so I could watch the street while I worked. My days were still full of deadlines and revisions, but my stress shifted from, "Will my family implode if I don't fix this?" to, "How can I make this interface cleaner?" which is the kind of stress I actually get paid for. I picked up a couple of bigger clients, started saying no to the ones that treated me like a vending machine. And instead of using every bonus to plug some new hole at home, I bought myself things that had no purpose except that they made my life nicer. A better mattress, a yoga class membership, noise-canceling headphones that were just for me. I still saw my family, but now it happened on my terms. The first time I went back for dinner after the heat situation, the house felt strange, as though it was learning to stand on new legs. The thermostat was set lower than Carol used to like it. There were fewer takeout containers, and the television was off when I walked in. Carol had dark circles under her eyes, but there was something steadier in the way she moved. Halfway through eating, she slid an envelope across the table to me without looking up. When I opened it, there was a folded check inside for $100. "It's not much," she said quickly, "but it's the first payment for what we owe you." My throat got tight. I didn't need the money back. Not really. What I needed was exactly what that envelope represented. Acknowledgement. A few weeks later, there was another envelope, then another. Not every month, not on a schedule, but often enough that I believed she meant it. Dylan didn't become a model adult overnight, but he did get a job. The retail idea lasted about 3 weeks before he realized selling shoes to picky customers wasn't the dream. He ended up at a warehouse across town loading and organizing inventory. At first, he hated it. Then the first time he showed up to dinner in a work shirt with his name on it and said kind of quietly, "I got bumped up to shift lead." I saw a flicker of pride I had never seen when he was yelling into a webcam about sneakers. One evening when Carol went to grab dessert from the kitchen, he cleared his throat and said, "I sent you $50 on digital payment for the course, the social media one. I know it's not the full amount yet, but I'm going to pay you back for all of it." I just nodded and said, "Thank you." And we both knew I was hearing more than the words. He had stopped scrolling for miracles and started showing up for shifts. That was the real repayment. The biggest change, though, was in the way they treated my time. The midnight calls about routers and passwords stopped. If Carol called now and I didn't answer right away, she left a normal voicemail and waited. If Dylan texted with a, "Hey, can I ask your opinion on something?" it was literally an opinion, not an emergency disguised as a question. We still argued sometimes. Old habits don't evaporate just because you put your name on a lease. But there was a line now, and everyone knew it was real. I was their daughter, their sister, not their built-in rescue plan. People like to say that revenge is about making the other person suffer. But sitting in my little studio, looking at the sunlight on my desk, I realized my version looked different. My revenge was living a life they no longer controlled, forcing them to grow up by stepping out of the role that kept them small. Carol learned how to budget without assuming her oldest would silently fill every gap. Dylan learned what it feels like to earn his own money instead of spending mine. And I learned that loving your family doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. If any part of this sounds familiar, if you're the one everyone calls first and thanks last, ask yourself a question I avoided for years. What would actually happen if you stopped fixing everything? Not in a dramatic disappearing act, not to punish anyone, but as a choice to finally choose yourself. You might be surprised by who falls apart, who steps up, and who for the first time learns to stand without leaning on you.